She's like the female James Bond.
She's safety chick.
The safety chick.
I love that safety chick. That's what
She calls
it.
herself the safety chick.
I was a stalking victim, having to learn every possible aspect of personal safety to stay alive.
The safety chick. We love her.
Yeah. Kathleen Gallagher, the safety chick here. Hey, recent stories in the news of drug-facilitated assaults made me want to do this show today. Awareness needs to be raised as to how important it is to watch your drink when you're out socializing and how easy it is to get drugged. 2 North Carolina men visiting South Beach, Miami, were arrested and accused of drugging and raping a woman who later died in her hotel room. The victim was a 24-year-old woman visiting from Pennsylvania. The men are also accused of stealing the woman's credit cards to spend money on their trip in South Beach. Investigators are trying to determine whether the woman died of an overdose, possibly from a pill the men supplied. The Miami-Dade circuit judge that is assigned to the case, Mindy Glazer, expressed her concern about the accusation, saying he couldn't even pick up the phone to call police or 911 after they did whatever it is they did to her. That case is still pending. Druggings don't just happen to women, though. It's not just to commit sexual assault. Men can fall victim as well. A woman in Miami is facing charges after investigators say she plotted up multiple schemes to steal cash and jewelry from unsuspecting men across Miami-Dade County. According to an arrest affidavit, the woman met her victim at a rooftop bar and lounge. The two left the bar and went to the man's apartment nearby. The victim told police he and the woman started having a few drinks, and the arrest affidavit states, after a few minutes, they went into his bedroom where the victim went into a deep sleep. Hours later, he woke up feeling like he'd been drugged and noticed that his Rolex watch and $2,000 in cash had been stolen, with the woman nowhere to be found. So how can you protect yourself from becoming a victim, and what should you do if you think you've been drugged? My guest today, Trinka Porrata, is one of the nation's leading experts in drug-facilitated assaults and the drugs the predators use to drug their victims. Trinka is a retired Los Angeles police officer. She served 25 years as a detective supervisor in street narcotics squads. She's a nationally recognized expert on the drugs Rohypnol, or roofies, gamma hydroxybutyrate, also known as GHB, MDMA, which is ecstasy, ketamine, which is special K, and LSD. In 1973, she was in the first group of women to become field certified as LAPD officers. Welcome, Trinka. I am so honored and so happy that you're on the show here today. I could not think of anybody more perfect to go over all these drugs than you. So after hearing those stories, I'm sure you're rolling your eyes going, oh my God, I've heard those stories so many times over all these years. But just to kind of give our listeners and viewers a background on this, what do you think are the most common drugs used in these drug-facilitated assaults?
Well, there's the myth that there's the 3. People talk about ketamine and GHB and roofies, but in fact, there's more than 50 that have been identified in these cases. And that's important to understand because each one has slightly different effects. It lasts for a different time in the body. And it just makes it that much more complicated. Anything that causes impairment. What happens when you take Benadryl? Most people get sleepy. So even Benadryl, if you don't know you're taking it and you're drinking alcohol, works. So there's a huge array of drugs and there's a huge array of effects from them.
We talk all the time, and I've got to tell the viewers how we know each other. So I used to have my own segment on America's Most Wanted. And years ago, we did a segment on how drugs get dropped in your drink because I had seen, remember that it was a Las Vegas TV show. I can't remember the name of it. It's called Vegas. That's why. And I remember that the plot was the guy was going around the pool drugging people, and they showed, a guy dropping these pills. It looked like Alka-Seltzer, you know what I mean? And I'm like, that's not how it happens. And so I really wanted to show people how easy it is. And so we did this whole sting operation where we, this is for the viewers. I know Trinka knows because she was my expert on the show. But so we had a bar and we filled it with extras, and we had women come thinking they were coming to a casting for a dating show, and I was the host of the show. And then we hired these young, good-looking actors and gave them little Visine bottles or breath drop bottles and filled it with water because, as we're talking about, GHB is clear, liquid, odorless, tasteless, all that stuff. And so we had hidden cameras put up all over the bar and filled the room with extras and paired the couples up. And we had a cocktail table, a pool table, and a little lounge. And we said, and the guys had button cams. So I was upstairs in a control room watching this all develop on camera. And anytime the guy would have a chance to, drop something in her drink, again, it was just water, but it shows you how, some of the girls would put down their drink and then go and play pool. And then the guy would come up and, hit it with the drops, or the guy would go to the bar and put the drops in the drink and carry it back and hand it. So it was so poignant to watch how easy it was for the guys to put the stuff in the drink and the girls to just, have no clue. They thought they really were in a bar. So it was quite the segment. And Trinka was my expert on that segment all those years ago. And so anyway, Trinka and I have gone back and forth, and she's taught me so much about the various date rape drugs and what they do. But in terms of cases that you've worked, and this is the hard thing is, you've told me again and again that it's so hard because women don't realize in many cases don't realize they've been drugged, right? Until it's too late. And, they're picked up for DUIs and cops aren't realizing that, no, they really have been drugged. So fill us in a little bit on, what you've seen over the years and, the mistakes that law enforcement and hospitals are making, not recognizing that the victims could be a victim of a date rape drug. I know you hate that word, date rape drug, but
yes, I do.
I know. Tell us why. Let's just start there.
Drug.
Let's just start there. Why do you hate? You schooled me on this years ago, but why do you not like the word date rape drug?
It's not about a date. Sometimes it's on a date. It happens on a date, but it's not about a date. It's about sexual assault and it's about drugs. And it doesn't always happen on a date. It can be your best friend who just really would like to have a better, a more sexual relationship with you. It can be a complete stranger from across the room, or it could be a date. So the correct term is really predatory drug. And these same drugs are used, as you mentioned in the opening, for robbery, for credit card theft. It doesn't have to be a date.
Right. So let's go back, and I know I asked you about the cases that you've seen over the years. Can you tell us a couple stories, cautionary tales, so to speak, of what you've seen over the years?
There's such a variety of it. One thing I want to get across before I forget, we're so used to talking about the young woman that goes out to a party or to a club. But in the last few years, I've seen a lot of these where it's not that kind of a scenario at all. It's a 47-year-old woman at a conference, a business conference. In fact, one woman was in a foreign country. It was an international company, and she was the employee of the year. So her picture was blown up gigantic over the conference hall. And yet she was targeted by one of the top men in the corporation and was drugged and sexually assaulted by two of the people that she was there with. I mean, that's not the usual scenario that people expect. So it can be any kind of a situation. One case I was dealing with here recently that just shows how subtle the approach can be. Um, this lady, a guy that she had known from work, had asked her out a number of times and she had turned him down. She didn't dislike him. She didn't think he was creepy, just wasn't particularly interested. And then he asked her again to go for a drink. And she said, well, okay. So he knew what her car looked like from the parking lot. So she goes to the bar. She got there first. She went in and she ordered a drink. He shows up. He comes in and says, oh, is that your car over there? And she said, yes. And he said, your car door's open. Well, she thought, my gosh, how could I have left the car door open? And she rushes outside, rushes to her car, leaving her drink sitting right there with him. and her car door is open. She left it unlocked, but not open. And she was embarrassed. She thought, how stupid could I be to leave my car door open like that? And remembers nothing from that point on. She ended up actually driving under the influence in a major traffic accident, almost killed some people, has no recall. She even flipped the car over, complete rollover, and then continued to drive until she, for some reason, stopped and the police had been called. That's the most unusual approach I've seen.
Yeah.
And who would think, who would expect something like that from somebody you know at work, especially? Wasn't a stranger.
I'm so
So
glad,
she ends up having to deal with that.
I'm so glad that you did say, that it's not just like a young girl out at a club because, I speak all over the country and I have, many different ages in my audience. And I say the same thing is that, my ex-husband, 6'6", 250, football player, he was in Vegas at a conference, had one vodka cranberry and, felt so woozy. He said he barely made it back upstairs and he just face planted on his bed and woke up the next day. I mean, just out. So it's, don't just think because you're not a party girl and you're not out there in the club, it can happen to anyone, anywhere. That is the truth.
Anyone, anywhere, any age, any
Yep,
age.
exactly. So tell us, I think for me, one of the most poignant drugging cases was Natalie Holloway. And, we feel very strongly that they gave her GHB or whatever and probably gave her too much. And she stopped breathing on that beach. And that's where her life ended. That's the tale. Although we never really do know for sure. But explain to the listeners and viewers the effects of GHB and how that works and why they call it the great date rape drug because of the amnesia effect, why it's the perfect drug.
Well, all of the drugs that are used, for the most part, the number one aspect is amnesia. That's the key thing that they're looking for is the victim won't be able to report it later and really give any details. Um, on top of that, of course, the impairment that gives the inability to give or withhold consent or to protect themselves, to fight it off. Roofies are a paralytic, so they actually prevent you from being able to, people describe unable to lift their legs or lift their arms because of this feeling of paralysis. That's how roofies work. GHB has a special problem. It is a sexual stimulant for many people. So the videotapes we end up with often look like the victims participating, which of course makes it impossible to sometimes to get the police or the prosecutor to even be willing to go forward with the case. I've had so many with videotapes where I've had to say, no, wait, let's break down the tape. Here's this person that is falling down, that is bent over a sink with her head in the faucet and her one breast in the sink and one on the countertop, and her knees banging against the sink. This is not a romantic, consensual encounter. This is not a person able to give or withhold consent. And then later in the video, where it appears that she's participating, that's the drug. The sexual aspect of GHB makes it look like she's participating. Ecstasy also has the sexual component. So, and a classic case is that we actually convicted a guy on some ecstasy cases. They're really tough because of that. You don't have that same type of obvious impairment from being drunk, intoxicated. She said that she wasn't there. It wasn't a date. It was actually supposed to be a business situation. But he mixed a drink and said, be sure you eat the piece of candy that he had tossed into it, which happened to be an ecstasy pill. She was young and naive about drinking. It was so sweet and fruity that she didn't think it had a lot of alcohol in it, and she ate the piece of candy. But her brain was very confused. Part of her brain was saying, I'm not here for this. I'm not here for this. This isn't right. But the other part of her brain was saying, oh, wow, that feels so good. Oh, every touch feels good. On ecstasy, we see people crawling on the pavement, caressing the pavement, going, oh my God, it feels so good. Well, it's pavement, it's blacktop. So this young girl she was afraid to go ahead with prosecution at first because she felt so stupid that, she was alert and conscious of what was happening, but it felt good. She couldn't stop the sensation. So we explained to her, you just go in there and explain to them what happened, how you felt, and I'll explain the drug. and he was convicted.
Oh, that's great. And it is, I mean, Trinka, how rare is it to get these cases prosecuted?
It's really difficult. First place, people don't report them. Who wants to be the one that goes in, especially if it's a celebrity, or some high-profile sports star or something like that? I think somebody had sex with me, but I don't know who, or I don't remember what happened. You have this vague amount of information. Who wants to be that person that can't explain it? And so many of them are never reported. Um, I dealt with a lawsuit against one police department where, um, when she tried to explain it, the response from the female officer was, "Well, if you don't remember, what are we supposed to do about it?" Well, it's called investigate.
Well, and that's why
Then,
you have been doing this for so many years, and the great thing that you do is go around the country and educate law enforcement, first responders, all of that, because that's vital. You and I both know that's really where it all starts. You have to do the investigation. Some if it what is it, walks like a duck, quacks like, that whole saying. It's, and I appreciate you and the work you do bringing awareness to this, because it is really difficult and really scarring on victims' lives.
well, what's really disturbing to me right now, though, is even a few years ago when things were better politically, so to speak, better times in terms of budget and stuff. After one class, a female detective came up and she said, "This is all great, but we're not allowed to spend that much time on a case." Oh my gosh, that's it's an investigation. It's what you have to do. But right now, the problem is so many police officers are quitting. So many departments are down on manpower, um, because of the turmoil of the times. This is not a focus right now, and I'm seeing it in the effects and the aftermath of it. I'm seeing it in what the detectives are telling me. A couple of years ago, New York PD called me. They started a task force on drug facilitated sexual assault. I was like, "Oh wow, that's so exciting!" Well, they were going to set up training. We talked about it. Well, suddenly we had so much turmoil that, as far as I know, and there was political upheaval there in that department. And I'm pretty sure that task force never happened because I never heard from them again. And they were so excited. Um, so right now we're missing these. We're missing the time for detectives. With the pandemic, officers here locally, um, weren't allowed to meet directly with victims. They had to do it by telephone. And they said it's so disheartening because you really can't relate to the person and you can't comfort them and console them, as easily. But I wanted to say there was a campaign started, called Start by Believing. Start by Believing was started by the In Violence Against Women International. And there was some pushback. Some people said, "Oh, you can't have detectives only believing the female." Well, that started a few years before the Me Too generation thing. Um, and there was some controversy about it. Well, here's my point. Here's how I look at it. So forget all that stuff about, Me Too or whether it's biased. The point is, you start by believing that something needs to be investigated, no matter how crazy the story sounds, because these stories are confusing, sometimes weird. Um, you start by believing that something needs to be investigated, and then you follow the evidence wherever it takes you. And it may not go where you thought it was going to take you. But that's the point. Start by believing something needs to be investigated and then do your job.
Just going back as to protect yourself as a potential victim, what are some of the key elements to protecting yourself against being drugged?
Well, it's like burglary. If they want to get into your house, they're going to find a way. Even if you have a burglar alarm, if they really want your house. Um, so you have to do what you can. There's no 100% guarantees, but you have to do what you can to protect yourself. So in these cases, um, you want to know who you're with. You want to know your friends and who you trust. Um, if you can, if you're concerned at all, uh, you may want to have a beer that you have to open yourself. You don't want it brought to you open if you're really in a situation where that's a concern. Other than that, you have to guard your drinks. I have always said that I could drug your drink in your hand in a crowded bar. And we now have a video of that proves that, where she's standing there and you got your drink in your hand and you're talking to your friends and you're swinging the drink around, but it's kind of off to the side. And a guy walks behind her and drops a pill in her drink.
There was a concert. I saw a girl outside at a concert, and they were videotaping it, and a guy came over her shoulder and dropped it in her drink as well. And, there was another story just recently on TikTok where a waitress was talking about she witnessed a girl went to the bathroom and she watched the guy put something in her drink. And so she followed the girl into the bathroom and told her. And they called the cops and he was arrested.
We have a case in California that's still not finalized. It went through the prelim, but it still hasn't gone through trial, where the guy just, she goes to the bathroom and the guy just drops it right in her drink. And one barmaid sees it and goes and grabs the drink and tells him, oh, we did something wrong. We have to remake the drink. And the other one ran into the bathroom and told her. So they had her go back to the table. And he was going to do a drug the second drink too. They had her go back to the table, but they'd already called the police and they said, whatever you do not touch the drink. So they called the police and the police responded and grabbed the drink and he was arrested. He's being prosecuted right now. It's still pending. It's just so easy. There's a case in Philadelphia. Philly Mag did a great story. First, he did a story on a bar that did not have a video camera set up. Somebody had told the reporter about an incident where felt her drink was drugged. And so they did a story about it. 19 people came forward and told similar things that happened to them. None had reported it to the police, and there was no video. But the story brought awareness to the issue. So down the street, another bar that had a camera, this guy comes in. It's a long galley type bar, and the walls like behind where the patrons are sitting. I guess that's where they walk in. But on that wall is a jukebox. So he starts chatting with this gal. He says, oh, why don't you play some music? Hands her some money. She turns her back to her drink and to him, and she's putting money in the jukebox. He does the perfect furtive gestures, looking back and forth, reaches in his pocket, pulls it out, and reaches over her drink and drops it. A former bartender from that location happened to see him. She runs over and grabs a drink. And the bartender says, what are you doing? I just made that drink. She said, yeah, and he just dropped something in it. So when the young lady turns back around, of course, she's like, oh my gosh, she didn't want to call the police because nothing else happened. She didn't know what to do. So the bartender, unfortunately, dumped the evidence. This awesome video. It's like, he's so identifiable. It's great. And he tries the offensive route. He goes to the police and says, oh, that's me in the video, but I didn't drug her drink. My hand was never near her drink. Well, in the video, it is. He goes right to it. So, unfortunately, though, they didn't have evidence of even the drugging part. And because the gal intervened, nothing happened and he wasn't prosecuted. But it's a classic video. It's just amazing now.
So here's the thing. So, what if you suspect that you have been drugged? I always use the example of like, if you have one or two glasses of wine, how you feel. For me, because I'm Irish, I can have a bottle. I have a hollow leg. I'm just kidding. But so the thing is, how you feel after one or two glasses of wine or three glasses. And, you have one or you've taken a couple sips and you start feeling that woozy, drunk right away, I guess is what I always try to say. But, tell us a little bit more about what symptoms does someone feel? You were talking about the ecstasy and that feeling, but, what are the symptoms that somebody could be feeling that has been drugged?
The most obvious, of course, is that you feel way too drunk too fast for what you've consumed, that you've knowingly consumed. The problem is there's not necessarily a lot of time to do anything. But if you feel that you're with friends, say to somebody, stay with me. I think something's wrong. I'm too drunk or nauseated. GHB is one of the ones that cause a lot of nausea. So you want to get to somebody if you can, if there's somebody there, it's easy to tell people go to the security guy or go to the bartender, except that they may have been involved, especially the bartender. So it's kind of
Right.
hard
What is the
to tell.
percentage? I had that in my first book. What is the percentage of druggings from bartenders?
I don't know if we have a percentage, but it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon that a bartender or a barmaid is involved with drugging the drink or helping target the victim, especially if it's somebody that's not in contact with the victim. It's a stranger across the room, so the bartender knows who he's interested in, and he drugs her. And then when she starts, staggering, he pretends to be the good Samaritan and help her. Um, and so people around him think, oh, what a nice guy, he's helping her, and don't realize that they're watching a crime in progress. But the complication is that some of these drugs, especially GHB, um, there's no warning. There's no warning. You may feel that pending doom or that pending nausea or drunkenness, or you may not. You can, you may turn to go to the bathroom or turn to walk out the door to go home with absolutely no concern that anything's wrong, and then you simply have no recall after that. Um, and that's frightening. But that's how fast
Oh,
some of
it's
these work.
terrifying. I remember you saying on our America's Most Wanted segment, um, a couple of drops of GHB are equivalent. Do you remember what you said? To a certain number of beers with a sprinkling of PCP on the top. I'll never
Exactly.
forget you saying that.
It's like having a couple of beers and then PCP, just a little tiny bit of PCP on top of it. It's a dissociative anesthetic, which PCP is. It's not just a central nervous system depressant like alcohol is. And it can have this blinding effect that just boom, you're gone. Um, the big myth about drug rape is that you pass out, and that's not true necessarily. A victim may be unconscious the whole time, part of the time, or none of the time. That does not mean your body's not functioning. So you turn to go to the bathroom and you start walking that way, and the bad guy comes up to you. Oh, are you okay? It looks like if you're not feeling good, let me help you. And you're like, oh, part of your brain is asleep, and part of your brain is saying, oh, I need help. Something's wrong. And he walks you right out the door, and you will walk with him, even though you've never seen this guy before in your life. That's what's particularly frightening about the videos. It is not true that if you were drugged, you will be unconscious, and you don't know the difference. A classic example, um, we had a lady in Sacramento that went to a bar and she didn't drink anything before her friends got there. Then she had one margarita, and then they were going to leave. And she remembers everything. She remembers getting up and walking out the door. She remembers walking toward her car, and then she just remembers nothing. We know she was in the parking lot for a little while, so we think she may have been approached by somebody then, or the drink that just before she walked out the door was drugged. It's a little confusing how it happened because she's in the parking lot for a while. She ends up driving away. She has no recall of getting to her car or driving away. But she drives out and crashes into a parked car. A citizen follows her and calls the highway patrol. She's arrested. She has no recall of the contact with the officers. She's taken to the station where she is booked. They draw blood. She's talking to her and somewhat responding to the nurse who draws her blood, although she's very limited responses. Um, when she goes in the bathroom to do a urine sample, she falls down and passes out against the door. They have an awful time getting the door open and getting her out. They put her in a holding cell. And at some point, she, in her mind, wakes up. She snaps out of it. GHB can have a very, very sudden awakening, a very abrupt oh my gosh, you're just awake like you're shot out of a cannon is how they describe it. And she turns to this woman who's sitting there and she says, "Oh my gosh, how long have you been passed out here?" And the lady says, "Passed out? You've been sitting here talking to me for an hour and a half."
Wow. Wow.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. So, the big thing about GHB and Rohypnol and the different drugs, as you always say, if you feel like you've been drugged, that something is not right, you need to get to a hospital immediately because the drugs don't stay in your system long, correct?
Every drug is different. GHB, I consider GHB the gold standard in that, and I talk about GHB a lot in my classes because it's the quickest one out of your system. So if we set our goal to catch a GHB case by responding really quickly, everything else is easy because those drugs stay longer. Blood is not the best sample, it's urine. If I do community presentations, I'm tell them, I want you screaming. I want you at the hospital or the police station as fast as possible. I want you screaming, I want to pee in a bottle now. If they want to draw blood later, fine. If they want another urine sample later, fine. But you want them to take a urine sample as soon as possible. And I would say if you have to, find a nice clean paper cup, pee in it, hand it to the officer,
Right.
give him my name, he can cuss at me.
Yeah, but the thing is, we've had this discussion before, but in hospital rape kits, when a person comes in, as a rape victim, do they do a urine sample? Do they test for drugs?
Well, traditionally they took blood, and then urine was only taken if there was a specific request from the officer, or gradually it's been included more often for that reason. But still, there's some sexual assault kits that don't automatically include it. We changed that, and much of California, we changed it to where you automatically want a urine sample. But that's why I want victims to know urine is the best sample, that
Right.
forensic sample. That's what we need. What people don't understand is when you go to the hospital, they may take a urine sample that they use for diagnostic purposes. So they take a urine sample and they test for certain things to see if you're okay, if you're pregnant or whatever, given the circumstances. But it's not for law enforcement. So that first sample sometimes is then thrown away once they test for what they're going to test for. And then later they have a urine sample taken for the sexual assault kit. And you've lost time. You want the first sample to be saved. You want the most, the quickest possible sample to go for forensic purposes.
How can you go? I mean, and again, the poor victim is like, he's completely out of it. It's just been sexually assaulted, but you've got to fight for your right to get evidence to prove.
Got to advocate for yourself.
Advocate for yourself, and that's why it's really important that we're doing this show. To all the listeners and viewers out there, hear us, because the other thing is safety in numbers. I mean, you got to have each other's back. You don't, it is not a smart personal safety choice to go out by yourself drinking. It raises the chances of something happening to you, because criminals
Right. It's not
and predators.
victim blaming. Some people
No.
go berserk, and it's not. It's, you don't leave your front door sitting open.
Thank you.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
you don't step
if you
out in front of a
protect your
train.
house-
You don't, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just about making smart personal safety choices. And we know what criminals look for. Predators look for the easiest target. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, it's a woman alone at night. I mean, it is what it is. It's not victim shaming. It's not, can't we walk? Look, predators, it's not about men. It's not about, men. It's not. It's about a predator. It's about a criminal. It's about a deviant that does this. So you can't lump everybody in.
We've had partners where it's a male and a female.
Right.
Where the female may actually be the one that approaches the victim because that's less of a threat, and she may be the one that drugs them. And we've had them where they engage in sexual activity with the unconscious victim, or the messed up victim anyway, and then pass it on to the male. So yes, it's not just
Right.
being worried about men. One of the cases I had recently involved a dating app. I've had cases with both male and female dating app situations. Um, in the female situation, if you talk to this guy online and you're going to meet him in a public place, yes, but in a public bar, which is exactly where this stuff occurs. So maybe, you have a friend that could just be in the background, either with you or in the background having a drink to see what happens. So her drink was obviously drugged. She ends up happy and out dancing with everybody on the dance floor. And this other guy hooks up with her that supposedly isn't connected to the guy she was meeting. And the guy she was meeting later said, well, she wandered off of this other guy. She didn't seem to be that interested in me. So whatever. So she doesn't recall ever seeing this guy inside the bar or talking to him or dancing with him. But she ends up in the video walking out the door with the guy in the plaid shirt. Um, the only recall of the plaid shirt that she has is a brief recall of being down on the dock on the wooden floor on her back with the plaid shirt on top of her. But she has no recall of seeing that plaid shirt in the bar, but we know he was from the videos. Wouldn't it have been nice to have had just a friend, maybe a couple that was going to go out and have a few drinks that night anyway, just be in the background? And maybe
Exactly.
they would have known you're getting way too friendly and way too happy here.
You know what it is? Just did a thing on Daily Mail about online dating tips, and I always say, look, you gotta FaceTime, stay on within the app. Don't give anybody your personal information in your cell phone or anything like that until you really get to know the guy. And they're saying like at least 5 video chats within the dating app, at least 5. And when you do go to finally meet the person in the day, in the middle of day, at a coffee shop, that's the thing about dating. We all know mix strangers and alcohol and
Right.
bad things happen. So, it's just, again, making smart personal safety choices. What was the other dating case that you were talking about?
Well, it was a gay situation. And they met on a gay dating app. And well, it's complicated by there were actually 2 separate cases, same suspect. The first young man didn't, he met him on Flickr and went there as a first date, first meeting, but said he wasn't there to have sex. He was just there to the first meeting, just like, she was. It wasn't a let's go have sex. It was let's meet. So he gets drugged but he went to the guy's apartment and he got drugged. He went to the police, but he was reluctant to prosecute at first because, he felt everybody would say, well, you're gay and you met him on Flickr, it's your fault. And so he was reluctant. Well, in the meantime, a young man that worked with this guy had broken up with his girlfriend and he was really heartbroken, but he wasn't old enough to drink in a bar. And this guy that he worked with, that he knew was gay, said, well, you can come to my house and feel safe. You can have a drink at my place. So he actually went so far as to take his brother as a designated driver so that he could just get drunk and act stupid um, and, lament his loss. And then his brother would take him home. So at some point, his brother stepped outside to talk to his girlfriend. And when he went to come back inside, the door was locked. And he's like, oh my gosh. And he's banging on the door. He called his brother's phone number and he could hear the phone ringing, but nobody was answering. Nobody was opening the door. He even called the police and they banged on the door and called on the phone and nothing happened. And they said, well, we can't just break in. Apparently they locked you out for a reason. So he finally went home. Well, when his brother snapped out of it, it was a classic GHB case, classic 4-hour time loss and classic symptoms of GHB. He called his brother and said, why did you go off and leave me? He's like, tells him what happened. He went and picked him up. He went to the police station and made a report. The bizarre thing about the suspect in this case was he testified like the spider to the fly. He used that term. He came They came to my apartment, so I could do anything I wanted. That's how it is. He kept saying time and space, time and space. They gave me time and space by coming to his apartment. So this was really, and he actually videotaped the young man who was straight. And so we did go to court, and we just couldn't believe his comments that
The
he had when he
brazenness, just
testified.
the brazenness and the predatory
You
nature.
know, the reporter that after I testified, when he testified, we were astounded that he testified. And then on top of that, he simply confessed. And the reporter turned to me and said, "Did he just say that?" And I said, "Yes, he
We love
did."
it when they do that. We love it when they do
Oh yeah,
that.
and
The
he couldn't
arrogance.
understand how he got sentenced to, all those years in prison.
Yeah, Jesus. Thank God. So just to kind of wrap things up, again, it's not about scaring people out there. It's about these are real life issues. This really does happen quite a bit. And so, how do you protect yourself? How do you protect yourself? Well, you start with the whole safety in numbers thing. Like you said, I mean, these predators look for their opportunity, spider and the fly, whatever. And so, you know, everybody out there, when you're going out, make sure that you go together and you all come home together. That's the key. If I see one more drunk girl stumbling out of a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning and ending up weeks later in a ditch somewhere, I'm just like, what? We need, as women, we have got to have each other's back. You cannot leave your girlfriends, no matter how cute the guy is, no matter who you meet. I mean, save that
Do
for
you
later.
remember?
Yeah.
Actually, absolutely. Do you remember the history of the bar where we did the show for America's Most Wanted? Do you remember the history?
Was it the bat? What? No, remind me.
The same place, the very same bar before you did the show. Um, three girls went together, and they were going to watch each other's back. Well, what does that mean? Watch each other's back, right? So the first girl sees a friend across the room, and she goes to talk to her friend, wanders off away from the other two girls. The other two girls, this guy he's flashing big money and he's buying drinks, and he buys um, her friend a drink. She turned it down, but the one friend took the drink. Next thing she knows, her friend is hanging all over this guy. Just completely different behavior than consistent with her. And she walks away from her to go get the other girl across the room. And when they come back, guess what? She's gone.
She's gone.
That was
That's right.
the limo rapist. He took her out the door into his limo and took her away.
That's
He
right.
was good for a number of rapes, and we ended up catching him. That was at the same location where you
Isn't
did the
that
show.
crazy? And that bar, it's one of those bars that has many different levels. It's so easy to get lost in there. That is that again.
Watching your back means seeing that person's back the whole
Yeah,
time.
exactly. That means being right there. But who would think? I mean, again, you're in a crowded place. You've got friends around you. You've got people around you. But that's the point. It's like you have to have your wits about you when you go out into situations like that, and you hear it time and time again. And again, the thing for me that drives me crazy as the safety chick is watching those young girls, like the girl that got into the wrong Uber. It wasn't an Uber, it was a guy, and he ended up killing her. Those kinds of incidents can totally be helped if you just, again, plan your dive your plan. Okay, you guys are all going out, all gonna have a good time, but make sure that you truly, not figuratively, have each other's back and make sure that everybody gets home safely. So in all your years of great and incredible work, what is the one case that really stood out to you, that really kind of shook you to your core?
Well, I think the Andrew Lester case was pretty bizarre. He actually sexually assaulted women who were perfectly willing to have sex with him voluntarily. He and some of them did.
That's the
And yet,
Max Factor error, right?
right, the heir to the Max
Max
Factor
Factor,
fortune,
right?
Andrew Lester, he actually preferred having sex with a semi-comatose victim. And there's one video of him standing in front of an unconscious victim in the back, rubbing his hands down and saying, "Oh, wow, there's a beautiful strawberry blonde passed out for me to do whatever I want to with her." And, one woman lived with him, and yet he was still having sex with her when she was unconscious that she didn't know about. Um, it was a bizarre case in every way. And yet the good thing about that case was that the detectives were right on. It was a textbook case of everything done right, given a really sick predator. Um, so that case has always been the classic of a terrible thing that can happen and yet being done right. Those guys, you know, they did the right thing. They had a pretext phone call where he actually admitted some of it to the girl. And we do that a lot with victims with these cases. Even if you don't get a full confession, sometimes they'll tell her, "Oh, baby, nothing happened. No, no, no. You just got really drunk. And, well, I took some of your clothes off so you would be more comfortable on the couch, let you sleep it off. But nothing happened." Well, then when he finds out that she's gone to the police, now when the police talk to him, he goes, "Hey, it was consensual sex." "Oh, really? Because she told you she didn't remember and you told her it didn't happen." Now you've got a conflicting statement, which is sometimes almost as good as a confession. So
Right.
that was really an amazing case of how they handled it. And we had our best expert that testified. It was just an awesome case.
Well, let's hope, as you continue the work that you do and we continue to get the word out any which way that we can, that there is more awareness to the subject, because I kind of feel like, well, and again, with the pandemic and everything shut down, I don't think it's really been on top of mind, but now everything's, now that the country's starting to open back up again, now that college kids are getting ready to go back, back to the campuses, and people are so gung-ho and ready to get out on the town. But it's been a while. So I think a lot of people have let their guard down because they're so used to being at home, being safe. So these are just gentle reminders of, hey, there's still predators out there. More now because they're letting criminals out on a huge basis because of COVID. So,
Exactly.
this is a different landscape that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, well, just before the pandemic really shut everything down. Just before it, there was a big case that broke in Northern California where they were finding a particular bar that a lot of this stuff was happening, and there was a big story about it. And then, of course, everything shut down. But there's one thing I really, really want to get across too, especially at the college age thing. We always talk to the young women, for the most part, and I think we need to spend more time talking to young men about, one, don't become a predator. Being a sexual predator is a heavy jacket to wear for the rest of your life. You might want to reconsider, that becoming a predator and being a registered sex offender. But also that males can be victims too, in exactly the same ways. And there is also the issue of false allegations. Yes, it does happen. I have dealt with 3 or 4 young college men whose life were turned upside down by false allegations, consensual sex that later became. One was mad because she found out after they broke up he was dating her best friend, and she went after him. And even with them unable to prove the allegations, there was nothing to prove them. He was thrown out of college. So young men also need to understand they have to protect themselves. This whole hookup stuff of casual sex with no commitment can really go sour. I have a case
Absolutely.
in Peru. I have a case in Peru of a naive 15-year-old who engaged in a hookup, but when things went wrong and she got mad, it became a sexual assault allegation. And
At
despite
15 years
15
old. Oh,
despite a complete lack of evidence that she was drugged. I've never had so many witnesses, and not a single one of them substantiate her, and yet they're still prosecuting him. That's crazy.
and
So
that's,
yeah,
yeah.
we
You
need to talk to young men about that risk.
you bring up a really a really, really good point, because look, extremism in any form is bad, and the pendulum swings back and forth. And I too actually know of a couple of cases where that same thing happened. And, I have 3 boys, and they were all college football players. And I know of a couple cases where a couple of their teammates got into some trouble, not because of false allegations. And it destroyed one kid's life, thrown out of school, never been the same. So there are situations like that as well. But anyway, I'm really glad that we covered this today. Is there anything else that you can think of that we want to share before we go?
Just, I think the most important thing is to advocate for yourself. If you think it happened, get forward as soon as possible and demand a urine sample.
Absolutely.
It's the best we can do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was so great seeing you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.
So, of course, we have to follow up with my safety chick tips on this one. And, this, because I did do so much research and did that segment for America's Most Wanted, and I have seen the lives that the havoc that being drugged, and being sexually assaulted or, robbed, same thing. I mean, not the same thing, but same thing in terms of being a crime victim after being drugged is so traumatic. So really raising the awareness, and when you're out on the town, you got to be aware of your surroundings, and you have to watch your drink. So here, let me read you some safety chick tips. Number 1, never leave your drink unattended. If you have to go to the restroom, bring your drink. If you hit the dance floor, bring your drink. If you're, immersed in conversation, hold your drink right in front of you. And as you remember, Trinka said, she's seen with her own eyes, you can be holding your drink, but not looking at it, and someone can easily drop something in there. So, really keep it right in front of you and keep your hand on it, especially if you're in a really crowded, close situation. Never take a drink from a stranger. Fraternity parties, you're at a bar, some guy buys you a drink and he, hands it to you. You never take a drink from somebody that you haven't seen being poured, or, the best, Trinka's advice was right. If you're in a situation at a fraternity or somewhere where you're not quite sure where that drink's being poured, opt for a closed bottle, like a closed beer or, a Coca-Cola or a bottle of water. I mean, remember, it's not just alcohol that gets drugged. It can be any kind of drink. So opting for the closed, sealed beverage is the safest. Okay, I know this sounds weird. That might sound weird, but never drink out of an open punch bowl. So, in the day, there always used to be those open punch bowls, and, the people used to spike, you bring your little flask and, you at the parties, and you spike the punch bowl. But in this day and age, you just can't. And also, like when you're going to big parties and there's a champagne fountain or even a chocolate fountain, I mean, reconsider if you're in a public place, what could be going on, what could be dropped into those different types of group fountains. And the biggest thing is, when in doubt, pour it out. If you've taken your eye off the drink, if you, forgot, left it, oh, darn it, I don't know. Or if you take a little sip and it tastes weird or whatever, go with your gut, and when in doubt, pour it out. Do not drink it. And the most important, if you feel like you've been drugged, you need to get to a hospital immediately, as we said, and be adamant about getting a urine test, because the drugs don't stay in your system long. You want a urine test that you can use for evidence for the police. So for more information, if you go to safetychick.com on my blog, I have a whole blog on rape, drugs, and drug-facilitated assaults. So you can get all the tips and the hotlines and different numbers off of there. So, I love all the messages that I've been getting on my different social media. I really appreciate the comments, and actually I've gotten a lot of people writing in saying, hey, do a show on this or do a show on that, which I'm happy to do. And also I've gotten, like I said, a lot of questions and concerns about people, whether you're being stalked or domestic violence issues or, identity theft issues. Always feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. I'm The Safety Chick. On Twitter, I'm The Safety Chick. My Facebook is Kathleen Gallagher, The Safety Chick, and of course, safetychick.com. Thanks so much for viewing, and until next time.
She's like the female James Bond.
She's safety chick.
The safety chick.
I love that safety chick. I mean,
She calls
own it.
herself the safety chick.
I was a stalking victim, having to learn every possible aspect of personal safety to stay alive.
Safety chick. We love her.
Yeah.